Can you tell me, is Vedanta scientific?
A good question. Is Vedanta scientific? In fact, this is a common question, and a lot of people even go to the extent of saying that Vedanta and science are something similar, and there is a huge pressure amongst a lot of teachers of Vedanta to try and show that Vedanta is following the principles of science. Need not be. It's not necessary, and we will see why. See, the aim of Vedanta and science are common, exactly the same. Vedanta also wants to know the intrinsic nature of this universe. Science also wants to know the intrinsic nature of the universe. So both of them have a common aim of knowing the intrinsic nature of the universe. Now, if you look at this universe, you have different varieties of things that appear in front of you. Okay? And each of these varieties, which are nothing but smells, sights, sounds, touch, tastes. So you have Shabda, Sparsha, Rupa, Rasa and Gandha. This entire universe is made up of only these five varieties of things: sights, smells, tastes, touch, sounds. Now, to study the universe, science collapses this entire universe into three classes, namely solids, liquids and gases. Why does it do so? Why does science do so? Science does it because it makes it easier for it to study this whole universe under these three heads of solids, liquids and gases. Then again, in these three classes, there are various other varieties at different levels. So science goes about studying this universe by categorizing and creating certain classes. Vedanta does the same thing. Okay? Vedanta does the same thing. Vedanta also classifies as sensual and essential. Okay? What is sensual and essential? There is a lot of information or knowledge that you gather using the senses, the indriyas. So these are called as indriya pratyaksha. Okay, this is the knowledge that you gain using the senses. Then you have essential, that is, you don't use the sense organs. Like for example, time and space. So you have sakshi pratyaksha. So you have certain inferences that you make using your mind, and you have certain knowledge that you gather using the mind, but this is not a knowledge gained through senses. So Vedanta also classifies as sensual and essential. Okay? So why do we do this? Why does science and Vedanta do this? To make it easier to proceed with the study or the research. But Vedanta, although it makes these two different distinctions between these two entities of sensual and essential, it also observes that there are certain overlapping features between these two. So what does it do? It creates a further class of observables and the observer. The observables and the observer are two distinct classes. Okay? The animate and the inanimate. The observable is the inanimate and the observer is the animate. The observer is sentient and the observable is insentient. Okay? So now here we have two distinct entities which have two different, totally different features. Unlike the earlier category of sensual and asensual, here we have two different features for these two different entities. They are called Atma, that is the knower, and the observable, which is the Anatma. Okay? Absolutely different. Tamah prakasha viruddha swabhavat. Okay? Itaretara bhavanupapattau arupapattihi. Okay? So there is no commonality of features. Tad dharmanam api sutaram itaretara bhavanupapattihi. There is nothing common between the two. So now Vedanta finds it easier to research into these two entities, the observer and the observable, and to come to a common understanding that it shares with science to know the intrinsic nature of the universe. Period. That's where the commonalities between Vedanta and science end. Why do I say this? Because now comes the means to know. Now if I have to know the universe, I have created these categories with my own understanding or through my own research. Now I need to have a means to know so that I can proceed with my inquiry. Now let's talk about the means to know. In Vedanta, let us first take science. Science, how does science know? Science also uses sights, smells, tastes, sounds, touch. Okay? Shabda, sparsha, rupa, rasa, gandha. Alright? So it uses these instruments to know. What does science do? In case science finds a limitation in gathering certain types of knowledge about certain observables, then science adds an instrument in between to know it better, to know the observable better. I'm stressing on the word observable. Science is investigating into the observable. It uses the certain means of knowing. It accentuates or it enhances the means to know by using certain instruments like the telescopes, the microscopes, stethoscopes. There are different scopes to bring in the data of the observable that scientists then investigate. Alright? Now, let us come to Vedanta. Vedanta starts with the basic premise that the observable is secondary, the observer is primary. In science, the observable is primary, and science had never taken into account the observer. Alright? So we will be touching about quantum physics and things at the quantum level. Not that I am an expert in that, but I broadly understand where they are going because I am a student of Vedanta. Okay? Vedanta's scope is far larger than the scope of science. And one needs to understand this. So Vedanta and science cannot be compared with each other because these both have different topics of research. The study of Vedanta is on the observer. Does it mean that Vedanta does not have the knowledge of the observable? Vedanta says that the knowledge of the observable is secondary importance, is of secondary importance. Primary importance is of the observer, and investigating and understanding the observer, having gained the knowledge of the observer through a process of investigation into the observer, subsumes The need for knowledge of the observable. What do I mean by this? That the knowledge of the observer, having gained the knowledge of the knower, you will automatically gain the knowledge of the observable. Okay? So, understand this. I'm reiterating, I'm emphasizing again and again that the scope of science is the observable. Even when they talk about quantum, at quantum levels, they are still observers separating themselves from the observation and the observable. In Vedanta, the observer and the observable are one unit. It's one single unit. The observer and the observable are together studied. Why? Because Vedanta itself understands and tells us, states emphatically that the study of the observer subsumes the need to even know the observable. Okay? So we are talking about what are the means to know. Now even when you come to the means, science uses the 5 sense organs to know, and science has enhanced through instruments that it uses to enhance nothing but these 5 sense organs. Okay? So Vedanta also agrees with this. It uses these sense organs, but it introduces you to one particular means of knowing which science does not use it, and probably the scientific or the scientist's world don't even understand the implications and the importance of this particular means of knowing. The means of knowing in Vedanta is known as Pramana. Pramana is a highly technical word in Vedanta which signifies the means to know. The Veda itself talks about the Pramana. So, I will talk to you about what exactly the Pramanas are in the next session, but in this session, I'm going to introduce an idea in your mind as to what is this Pramana that Vedanta is talking about. The Veda talks about Shabda, sound as being Pramana. And Vedanta is the Shabda Pramana. Shabda is sound. Veda contains words. The Veda doesn't actually contain words. On inquiry, you will come to know, on further investigation, you come to know that the Veda is nothing but sounds. What are words? Words are sounds. They are first sounds. They are heard. So the Veda is an oral tradition. You must have heard this. People saying Veda is an oral tradition. Why? Because the word can be written, but sounds necessarily have to be heard. Okay, point number 1. The second point I'm going to make is, from sound you can produce light. There is an effect called sonoluminescence. Okay? This is where the word enlightenment, and people start imagining that spirituality means enlightenment, moksha, enlightenment is moksha, all these kind of fancy terms without really understanding what it signifies. The word of the Veda can produce light in your minds so that it illuminates that darkness that is within you, and the darkness is of the observer. Okay. The observer is in darkness, and there is no way that scientific means of knowing no matter what stethoscope you use, no matter what energy reading that you do, what kind of EEGs that you fix to the brain, you will never know the self. You'll never come to understand who the observer, who the I is. So the means of knowing in Vedanta are completely different from the means of knowing that science and scientific fields employ. Veda and Vedanta use a Pramana. I'm going to have an entire session on this, especially on the Pramana. We are going to understand this right away in the next session of ours. Okay? Because this is of crucial importance. Once you understand that words are sounds, and these sounds are not any particular sound that is made in this universe. It is a sound which is captured in the Veda. The Veda mantras are nothing but sounds. It is every sound creates light. Next, we'll use the next session for knowing about the Pramana, the means of knowing, in length and in detail. So for now, understand that Vedanta, I would proudly claim that Vedanta is not scientific. Vedanta is not science. It has nothing to do with science. It need not be contaminated. The way you prove something, you postulate, okay? The postulate, then there is a proof. In Vedanta also there is a proof, and there is a way to prove it. This makes Vedanta alive. The understanding of Shabda Pramana makes Vedanta alive. Vedanta is the Shruti Vakya. Shruti is the Veda, and the Veda has to be heard from the mouth of a teacher. And everything becomes clear. So, the sound of Veda can produce, can uplift you, can take you to a certain energy level. You actually create a shift of cognition here in your head, and you start seeing the world differently. You understand the observer and you understand the observables. Science sees this. You don't have to be scientific. It is pure Vedanta that needs to be unfolded. And when we say Vedanta, we say along with Vedanta comes the teacher, because these words have to be handled properly. Every word creates a certain form of energy. I spoke to you about it last time. Every form of energy is a kind of light within your mind. And if the connection, it's like an electrical, an electrician wiring. Imagine if he wires it wrongly in your house, it could lead to a short circuit. It could lead to a big fire. That's what happens. In the name of spirituality, a lot of fires are taking place, and it is Vedanta alone, a good electrician, who comes and he rewires your brain. Okay? So that's all I have to say. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnam Mudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om.